Well, then a continuation of 2020. Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. The only time I've talked politics on the channel so far was in the form of a video with a script that I made. This is, I think, the first time that I'm going to be deliberately streaming with the objective of talking about something political, just live as I'm going. I don't have a script. I have a list with a few things that I want to talk about. Yeah, it's going to be pretty much entirely improv. This is not a meme stream. I genuinely want to talk about some serious things. It's been 2.5 minutes. I suppose I'll start by showing you guys the map. A guy in my Discord server made this. His name is Zarif. I'm just gonna back up. Can you see where this is going? Can you? All right, you're not ready for this. Let me just step outside. I like how half the people are saying Yugoslava and half the people are saying IKEA. This is CTF 324, except all the textures got flipped around and now everything is blue and yellow, which are the national colors of Ukraine. I felt like if I'm gonna be talking about a serious topic while playing TF2, I needed a map to match, and well, I think this does that job. I love this. Look at it actually looks decent too. That's the worst part. And here you can see a map of I'm not allowed to make this joke. Look at the Intel room floor special decal. Intel room floor, you say. All hail the ghost of Kiev. That is amazing. Holy crap, I cannot believe you whipped that up in this time. That is so good. People in chat, let us begin with today's discussion. I am assuming you have read the news, or heard the news, or seen the news, or anything, any way of human observing the news. There is a land war in Europe for the first major time since World War II. Now, technically, the breakup of Yugoslavia, plus a few other civil wars here and there, you could count as land war in Europe, but this is really the first land war in Europe. Let's start with the context for this. Probably a good place to start would be probably the breakup of the Soviet Union. That's like the technical start of the Ukrainian state started in the early 90s with the breakup of the Soviet Union. Since then, things have mostly been peaceful for Ukraine. Formally founded as a state with the collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 90s, it has been historically one of the poorest ex-Soviet states, even if it's been one of the geographically largest. It is on the western border of Russia. It is a sovereign, independent nation, and generally, it's just pretty much held out of the spotlight for the most of recent history. The earliest major crisis with the modern Russian Federation and Ukraine happened with the annexation of Crimea almost a decade ago at this point. I think that happened in 2014, I want to say. Since then, the Ukrainian identity has been one characterized by a mix of corruption and increasing nationalism, seriously. Now, recently, a new president was elected. His name is Zelensky. So, fun fact, the current president of Ukraine, Zelensky, was originally a comedian. The reason he was elected is because the comedy thing he did, he starred in a show in which he was the president of Ukraine. So the current president of Ukraine was elected because people watching the show about him being president of Ukraine loved the show even more than they loved actual politicians. He was elected as a populist and as a anti-corruption figure, and from what I've been able to tell, he's done a moderately decent job in fighting some of the corruption in the government of Ukraine. But the really big part is that, unlike all the other politicians, he is actually standing with the country. So that's context, history of Ukraine's end of the Cold War. Let's see. Right, let's go with the next talking point. So I have a list of talking points right here. You can see the document real quick. So things to talk about, context for the crisis, history of Ukraine's end of the Cold War, Putin's mindset, the year of escalation, and how Trump responded to that, the invasion start, which is now getting into the present, Zelensky, noble last stands, blown bridge, FU battleship, potentially fake heroes, Ghost of Kiev, and Glutton of Kiev that I've noticed over the last 24 hours, current status of the West, the UN, Russia's denial on the Ukrainian ambassador, what I think we should do, and war crimes committed and potential outcomes. So that's a little table of contents for this stream if you want that. Putin's mindset. Vladimir Putin, as you probably know, is an ex-KGB agent, so he was a Soviet spy during the Cold War. He was deployed to East Berlin, and I'm pretty sure if I remember reading this correctly, at the time of the Soviet Union's fall, he was a spy in East Berlin, one of many who was responsible for basically rooting out traitors, and he deeply opposed the collapse of the communist state. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, he eventually returned to Russia and started to grow his power base using KGB tactics, mostly in the realms of intimidation and political silencing, which, if you have any knowledge of the history of the Soviet Union, you can probably guess that that is just basically murder and blackmail. Oh, and bribes and torture and like all the things that we're not allowed to do because they're bad. So Putin was, quote, elected, quote. I say that with quotes because it is questionable whether or not he actually has ever won a legitimate election. Over the last couple decades, Russia has grown steadily more and more corrupt and has grown tighter and tighter under Putin's control. Putin has one major political rival at this point. His name is Navalny. That's his last name. I forget his first name. But Navalny, Putin tried multiple times to assassinate. One time, he almost succeeded hospitalizing Navalny. Navalny spent some time recovering in Germany before flying back to Russia, and when he returned to Russia, he was arrested on the spot, and he is currently in prison. First name Alexei. Thank you. Alexei Navalny is the main opposition leader to Putin, and he is currently in prison because of... What were the claims against him? It wasn't tax fraud. It was like embezzlement or something. Something stupid. Something economic that nobody has any proof of. Basically, Putin has an iron grip over the entire modern state of the Russian Federation, and that, as you can guess, is not great. And he wants to reform the Soviet Union. I'm just gonna go out and say that. Whether that's true, I don't actually know, but that's something that a lot of people have been reporting on, and it is something that President Biden has said, and it's something that I'm inclined to believe. Whether or not he wants to reform the Soviet Union as an empire, like in the traditional empire sense, or as a communist state, whatever, he wants to bring Russia's borders back to its former glory. He is a revanchist, he is a warmonger, and Putin is pretty much doing whatever it takes to reestablish the former borders of the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union, which were kind of the same. So, that's a bit of context on Putin. Let's see. Where's the next point? The year of escalation and Trump's acts is the next one. So, over the last year or so, things have been getting steadily worse and worse with Ukraine. There was a pretty notable crisis about the same time last year. Some point in the last 12 months, there was a crisis with Russia lining up a lot of troops on Ukraine's border, but then they pulled them off. Why exactly they did that? I don't know. Maybe it was just like conditioning, like, haha, we can do this and we're not actually going to do anything. Yeah, you wouldn't. Putin and Trump have a good history together, mostly. Trump has gone on record many times complimenting Putin. This is before he was president, during his presidency, and after his presidency. At all points, he has complimented Putin's style of ruling because Trump wants to be an autocrat. That is his ideal endgame. He admires Putin, and Putin is very, very happy to just sit back and go, huh, that's okay, sure, I guess you're friendly to me. So, Biden is elected, and Putin starts to escalate his things in Ukraine. Things start to get messy. There's that whole thing I mentioned 6 to 12 months ago, which if I might turn this into a video, why not? I'll be editing out all the awkward silences of me just trying to think, because it's kind of hard for me to just in the moment process all the things that I'm saying. There was the whole thing with escalating in Ukraine and then backing off, and then we come to this February. This February is when Russia started to seriously pull military might to the area, and everybody and their mothers kept asking, okay, but why are you doing this? And Putin's response was always, oh, there's some trouble going off in these border territories in Ukraine, and we have to protect them. Protect them. Yeah. Yeah, protect the people. The Russian separatists in Ukraine that are there and are not Russian agents. Yes, yes, protect them. Yes. So that was all fine and dandy, and he still had some justification. There was still some justification that was legitimate by Putin at the point when he was just saying that there was chaos in eastern Ukraine and they wanted to protect those territories. Then, in the last week, he declared those territories that have been trouble for Ukraine independent. Now that's a big move, because declaring someone else's territory as independent, that's kind of saying that someone else's government is illegitimate, and that's also not great. So he declared those territories were independent and thereby not a part of Ukraine. Even if he just did that, that's still salvageable. At this point in the international relations thing, he still has a notable reputation. Not a good one, but there's still some sense of this guy might be worth something. And then he orders troops in. This is the declaration of war. This is the most critical moment in the history of modern Europe in terms of actually having a war. He said in a nationally televised speech that Russian troops are moving in for a operation in the Ukraine and that they are not to be hindered, that they are a peacekeeping force. Even at that point, there is still the potential that things could have been salvaged, because had he gone along and only invaded the territory territories that were in open revolt that he claimed were independent, at that point he still had something vaguely resembling a casus belli, a justification for war. And then the troops started to flood in from the north. So basically, what I'm saying here, there is land war in Europe, and it is an unjust war. Putin's justification for this whole thing is that there are these territories that have been wanting to secede, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure most of the people there did not actually want to secede, and that was mostly Russian operatives being loud about it. So he decided, okay, these guys, we're going to say they're independent, and we're going to move in troops to, quote, protect them, quote, and then in total violation of literally everything he had said prior, Russian troops crossed the border in other areas of the Ukraine, and Putin declared that from that point onward, one of the major goals of the war was the demilitarization of Ukraine. That right there, that is the key moment. That is the, you cannot turn back now, this is your bridge too far. Saying that one of your goals for a nation is their demilitarization, that is a formal declaration of war, because you're saying that these guys do not have the sovereign right to have a military. And that is a sovereign right, that unless you sign it away in a formal treaty, which even then that brings your sovereignty into question, you don't do that. So at this point, this war is unjust, and the Ukrainians have every right to fight it and every right to defend themselves. All right, so that's probably all the backstory you need. Isn't this like China and Taiwan? Yes, that is a very fair comparison to make. The only difference between China and Taiwan and, you know, Russia and Ukraine, China and Taiwan, that is a much longer, much older conflict between two powers that are much more stable. Like Ukraine and Russia, Russia's one of their main motivations why Putin declared this war is because if he can win a quick, decisive victory here, it could help his standing at home. And the Russian economy, even before this war, it wasn't doing great. And now, okay, you guys are gonna love this. So in the wake of the invasion, one of the main responses by the West has been to throw sanctions at them. If you don't know what that means, sanctions are just economic restrictions, halting trade and stuff. The Russian economy has declined so far. I'm not making this up. The Russian economy has declined so far. Their currency, the ruble, is worth so little. The ruble is worth less than the Robux. And that's not the best part. The best part, the ruble is worth less than the TF2 refined. That's not a joke. I'm not making that up. Team Fortress 2 currency is currently worth more on a one-to-one basis than the official Russian currency. That is how screwed Russia's economy is right now. You guys are freaking out in the chat. I'm not making that up. It's worth less than refined. Yeah, that's not even a joke. Somebody look it up for me. How does the Russian ruble currently scale with whatever Venezuela's currency is? I want to see that, because Venezuela's kind of notorious for that. 3 keys for Russia, no cap. What are the chances of a draft happening for the United States? Minimal. The draft isn't going to happen, okay? The United States would only institute a draft if it was both at war and losing. That's the only reason it would ever happen. And currently, the United States military, not only are we not at war, there are not U.S. troops currently engaging, to my knowledge, in Ukraine. And if anything, the escalation of U.S. intervention would first start with sanctions, then it would go to a full economic embargo, then it would go to sending military volunteers to Ukraine, then it would go to a full expeditionary force, then it would go to a formally declared war with the United States military getting formally involved, then it would go to bringing in the full brunt of the military, and only if the full brunt of the US military wasn't able to defeat Russia in a 1v1, which by all rights it should, never mind the fact that literally everybody else in the world would dogpile on Russia if that happened, only if that were to be the case would the draft be implemented. There is no need to fear the draft. 1 ruble equals 5,161.78 Venezuelan bolivars. Sam, why would Heavy like Putin if he hates the KGB? Heavy TF2. This is a very common misconception. Heavy is not communist. If I understand the lore correctly, Heavy TF2's father was one of the White Army rebels during the original communist revolution, and after the White Uprising failed, Heavy TF2's father fled with his family to Siberia, where Heavy TF2 now currently lives. He is a counter-revolutionary. He does not support the communist government, and anyone making the communist Heavy memes, that is not historically or lore-wise accurate. I know, I'm a hypocrite. I've made plenty of those jokes in my career. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I've never made a communist Heavy joke. I'm just saying from a lore perspective, that's not entirely accurate. Alright, we should probably move on. Let's see, what do we got next? The invasion start. I think we've already covered that at this point. Like, the invasion start was mostly just Russia saying, okay, we're gonna send some guys in for a special operation for peacekeeping and the disarmament of the nation. Oh, also, I forgot to mention this, the denazification of Ukraine. If you don't know what that big word means, that's fine. Denazification, put it together, D as in undo, Nazi as in Nazi-fication, as in the process of. One of Putin's stated goals is to remove Nazis from Ukraine, which I think is personally hilarious, given that that's saying that Ukraine is run by Nazis, and that is an utterly ridiculous statement because it's run by a comedian. Speaking of the comedian, that is the next topic on the list. Zelensky. Volodymyr Zelensky is the current president of Ukraine, and he, I'm not gonna lie, kind of fits the description of a Chad. Like, just in terms of internet lingo, in terms of how that is described, I think Zelensky fits that definition. So, Zelensky was originally a comedian. No, he was originally a lawyer, and then he was a comedian, and his comedy show was What If I Was President of Ukraine? And it did so well, he was elected president of Ukraine. And he has spent his presidency doing anti-corruption measures. I know I've already mentioned all that before. So how does that fit into the invasion of Ukraine? Well, basically, Zelensky is a fiery nationalist in every sense of the word. He believes in his country, he believes in his people, and he is willing to risk his life for it. I don't know if you guys have been paying that much attention to the news, but Zelensky has been talking with every European leader out there for the last few weeks to try to de-escalate the situation prior to the war being declared. But after the war was declared, he did a complete 180 and went from, guys, let's just talk about this, to we will fight to the death and you will bleed out your nation trying to take us down. It is amazing how strong this guy is in his language and in the vigor of what he's saying. Zelensky has stayed in Kiev, despite the fact that Kiev probably tonight is going to come under siege from Russian forces. He has decried every action that Russia has performed against his nation. He is standing by his people. And let's see, there's a picture somewhere. I don't want to pull up the picture. Maybe if you guys want to find it and just put it in general chat in my Discord or something. Zelensky, he's strapped. He has a lot of guns. He is encouraging people to fight for their nation, and he is using history on his side. This is the single most impressive stand in terms of these guys will fight to the death since probably Poland in World War II. They are unbelievably determined, and a lot of contrast could be drawn to Poland in World War II in the sense that both of them were formerly occupied territories, now facing a much larger threat, and they don't want to give up their freedom. Balls of sphere tungsten, pure tungsten. Yeah, that describes the entire Ukrainian populace right now. Zelensky is leading the charge. He's described himself as Russia's enemy number one for the reason that he is leading that resistance. He has constantly been monitoring social media. He's constantly been monitoring all forms of international politics, and he's been making historical comparisons whenever possible, just to the general idea that Ukraine has been occupied so much in the past. They have been subject to so many other empires in the past, subjugated by the Soviet Union, subjugated by the Nazis, subjugated by the Russian Empire. He's gotten to the point where it's just the very idea that an elected leader would stand by his nation to the death, even if it is an entirely hopeless situation, you cannot help but see the honor in that, to see the virtue in that. Like, I can't really put words to the admiration that goes through my head when I'm thinking of the modern state of Ukraine, because they are so brave and so defiant in their resistance towards this unjust war by Russia. Sam, check Discord server. All right, this better be the picture. Yeah, here, let me bring this over. Look at this. Just look at this. This is the guy. Just look at this. He is dual-wielding Uzis. Yeah, that's what I said. He's strapped. And he is staying in Kiev. He has announced that, surprisingly enough, his family is still in Ukraine. Despite the imminent threat to their lives and to his life, both he and his family are staying in Ukraine. They will go down with their ship and die with their people, if that's what it takes. And that man is an inspiration to the rest of the world. It's just amazing. What else do we have on the itinerary? Noble last stands. Oh, before we get to that, though, I should mention, the siege of Kiev will probably begin tonight, if it hasn't begun already. At this point, Russian forces have rolled south through their puppet state of Belarus, and they are beginning to attack Ukraine. The death toll is in the hundreds, sorry, not Ukraine, Kiev. The death toll is in the hundreds. Tens of thousands of machine guns have been handed out to civilians throughout the city. Think about that. That is an American Second Amendment style resistance. That is fascinating. They're going to fight to the death. And if Putin wants to taken hold of Kiev, he will have to raise that city to the ground. It is the only option. Get off my lawn to a whole nother level. Yeah. Just the idea that people could endure such trauma to their city and yet still be willing to die for it. It's, if every man on earth was as virtuous as these defending Ukrainians, there would not have to be wars because of the amount of virtue in the world. Just, that's the best way I can put it. Should do a charity stream. I have never done a charity stream in my life. I have no idea how I would set it up. If I turn this into a video, there'll be some sort of charity in the pinned comments. I'll try and find one of those that you can do. Maybe Red Cross Ukraine. It's either Red Cross Ukraine or I remember there was some official Ukrainian government site. One of those two. I'll put those in. What about the Ghost of Kiev? I'll get to it. That's second next up on the itinerary. Next up, noble last stands. So there have been two specific instances that I want to address just on the topic of honor, virtue, and nobility. Just the very idea that these people are willing to sacrifice so much for the sovereignty of their nation. Specifically, the first one, Vitaly Skakun. I probably mispronounced that. I'm sorry if I did. Oh, wait, that was his middle name. Oh, no, that's a long last name. Oh, do I even want to try to pronounce this? Volodymyrovich, that's his last name. Vitaly Skakun Volodymyrovich was a Marine battalion engineer, and he was deployed, to my knowledge, in the south of Ukraine. The job of his squad was basically take out a bridge. That was their job. Russian forces were advancing. A Russian armored column was advancing. They needed to take out this bridge to stop their advance, or at least to slow it to buy enough time for everyone else in the area to mount a defense. They ran out of time. They didn't have enough time to blow it. The remote detonation could not be achieved. This guy I mentioned, he radioed his squad mates, told everybody, I'm blowing the bridge, and then he did it. He did not have time to get out of the radius. It had to be done immediately. He blew himself up in the process, presumably killing him instantly, and in the process, the bridge was entirely blown up as planned, and the Russian armored column was halted. The terrifying part of this is a real story. This happened within, I think, the last 48 hours. This is an actual thing that the amount of fervor in Ukraine is such that members of their army are willing to just go to such lengths, suicidal acts, literally suicidal, to defend their nation against Russia. It's hard to wrap your head around that. The idea that there would be an entire nation with so many of these people. Also, the other noble last stand I wanted to talk about... Snake Island is a rock in the Black Sea. It doesn't really have much of a military garrison, or at least it didn't. It provided a pretty key vantage point, at least to just looking out over the sea. Snake Island needed to be seized by the Russians, by the Russian Navy, in order to secure the area for the Russians. It had a garrison of 13 Ukrainian soldiers. A battleship pulled up, a Russian battleship, radioed the garrison there and said, this is a Russian battleship. We have you in our sights. If you surrender, we can minimize bloodshed. You have no chance. You will die otherwise. This is a Russian battleship. Please surrender. And now, I can't really say this because I have a history. I have a history of not using foul language on my channel, and I'm gonna be honest, I'd prefer not to break that now. There will come a day when I break that, but it's not gonna be today. Basically, the guy who picked up the radio on the Ukrainian side responded, Russian battleship, go F yourself. That's it. That's all it was. And then radio silence, and then a bombardment began, and within the hour, all 13 members of the garrison were dead. This is an actual thing that happened. There is a recording of it somewhere. I don't have it on hand for the reason that I haven't been downloading all of these files to my computer, but I have heard it myself and told the battleship to F himself. Battleship blew him, kingdom come. Since then, all 13 members of the Snake Island garrison have been awarded the highest medal available in the Ukrainian military. Did they have any actual practical impact on the war? Not really. But these individual acts of heroism that we're seeing pop up across the Ukrainian front, you haven't seen this kind of thing since World War II. You have not seen this kind of just, noble war since World War II that is as just a war as the Nazis want this land, we have to stop them. Because that's all this is. Putin wants this land, we have to stop them. Alright, that's noble last stands. There's the video. Okay, click on that link if that's actually the video, unless it's a rickroll. I'm not gonna click on it because it might be a rickroll, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't trust you guys. I don't trust you guys in the slightest. It isn't? Okay, alright. It wouldn't have surprised me if it was. But the whole Russian battleship thing, that is a fascinatingly short story, but it's just another one of those examples of modern heroism in Ukraine. Next up on the itinerary, potentially fake heroes. These are a couple things I wanted to discuss. Now we can finally get to the Ghost of Kiev, which is something that a few of you guys have been asking about. Let me just pull up the camera to cover this. The Ghost of Kiev is currently a urban legend around the Ukrainian capital of Kiev. So as you can probably guess, Russia has almost complete air superiority over the greater Ukrainian area. There's not really that much of a contest. Now, obviously, Ukraine still has some ground defenses that they've been using to shoot down some planes and helicopters here and there. But the big thing, the Ghost of Kiev is a legend that's been spreading about a single pilot that may or may not have become the first ace of the 21st century. If you don't know what that means in technical terms, an ace is a pilot who shoots down 6 other pilots in air-to-air combat. And according to the legend, there is one person responsible for this, and he's been given the nickname the Ghost of Kiev. There's not really much proof either way for the Ghost of Kiev yet, so it's currently still in the urban legend phase. 5 pilots, not 6? Or is it just 5 and I'm just genuinely stupid? Shoot down 5 for ace. Okay, 5 or more to be an ace. All right. So the current rumor is he shot down 6, whoever this guy is. And if this is true, it makes him the first ace of the 21st century in that he's the first person in this century to make that achievement. And that's been giving a lot of hope to a lot of people because the siege of Kiev has been, it's not been a pretty picture, honestly. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to the news. War crimes will get... I hate my server. I hate my server. I hate my server. I hate my server. Who did that? Who did this? The Dougler. Of course it was the Dougler. I hate the Dougler. I hate the Dougler. People are not losing hope, but people need more hope. And the Ghost of Kiev is giving them that hope. The idea that there's an ace pilot out there who is soloing the entire Russian Air Force and who can't be confirmed living or dead, that inspiration right there, that inspiration is huge in these people's lives. It's just nice. The Ghost of Kiev is currently a legend. It is currently unconfirmed, but if it is ever confirmed, whoever the Ghost of Kiev is will be one of the most famous people in the afterwar period. And even if the Ghost of Kiev isn't real, it's still a huge propaganda victory for Ukraine. And then there's another one. This is probably just a meme, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Have you guys heard of the Glutton of Kiev? Does that name mean anything to you? I saw a meme it was just like a few hours before I streamed. Apparently, according to this meme, I have no idea if it's real. It's realistically probably not. But according to the meme, there's some fat guy going around Ukraine completely strapped, just wearing like normal Adidas, just the stereotypical Slav outfit, going around killing Russian troops just to eat their food. That's it. Like, just imagine the concept of a guy running around the capital of Ukraine strapped because he wants to eat Russian supplies as they're coming in. That's such a stupid freaking funny concept, and I love it. I love it. You say no way. You might be right. I don't know if it's true. It's a meme that I saw. Who knows? Currently, a lot of the statistics, a lot of the stories that you're going to be hearing out of Ukraine are, unless there's actual footage of it, they're unconfirmed. But once this war wraps up, however it ends, there's going to be a lot of interesting stories to talk about. And I think the Glutton of Kiev is going to be one of those ones where it's just funny, honestly. Wants to eat Russian supplies and not rations. Yeah, it's funnier that way. He's eating ammo boxes. Sigma male rule 45, kill soldiers and eat their rations for nutrients. Alright, screw it. Whatever people donate during the stream, I'm gonna frickin' throw that same amount at the Ukrainian Red Cross after the stream. I feel kind of guilty taking money for this, so I'm just gonna do that. This isn't like a formal fundraiser. This is just I'm gonna throw some money their way. Let's see. Alright, what do we have next? Current status of the West. So, as you can probably guess, internationally, Ukraine is winning this war. The PR campaigns for both sides, Russia is absolutely flopping, everybody hates them, and Ukraine is dominating the airwaves. Almost every force out there, aside from Russia, China, and very specifically Donald J. Trump, everybody else in the world loves Ukraine and hopes they win. As for actually doing anything, though, that's a bit of a different story. Let's start with the US, because that's like the main other figure in this. The United States has been levying massive sanctions against the Russian Federation that are currently doing no favors to their economy. That's why the Russian ruble is currently worth the exact same as a Robux or lower. Basically, the US has only been sending economic sanctions Russia's way. But the crappy part about that is they haven't really been sending any meaningful sanctions. It's just been the inconsequential ones. Russian oil, that's one of their biggest businesses. It's just raw resource exportation to West Europe. The oil is still flowing, last I checked. There have been some countries that have cut off the supply, but most of them, energy and oil is still coming out of it. And that's still going to hold up the Russian economy for at least a little bit, even if it is now sinking. So the US still hasn't really meaningfully gotten involved in any significant way aside from just crashing their economy. Let's see, who else is there? Sweden, I believe they sent a large amount. It was either Sweden or Finland, one of the two, that sent 50 million to their defense effort. Estonia, I think, was the one that sent a bunch of anti-tank and anti-air weapons. So Estonia is directly funneling weapons into the Ukrainian army, which is good. they need those weapons. Maybe most significantly out of all their neighbors is Poland. Poland, as you can probably guess, does not have a friendly history with Russia. Poland does not like Russia. They are not friends with Russia. They are perfectly aware of the danger that Russia poses to them. So Poland, which is on Ukraine's border, has been accepting tens of thousands of refugees on their mutual border. So anyone who is fleeing Ukraine because they don't want to fight, because they value their families and their lives over their nation, they've basically been given a free passage to Poland, and Poland is doing whatever it takes to accept them. Now that's interesting for one very specific reason. Poland does not have a good history with accepting refugees. They, along with the Hungarians, were some of the most notorious parties during the major Arab refugee crisis that spawned out of ISIS and that whole thing in the Middle East. They weren't exactly friendly towards the refugees. However, there's a reason for them being friendly towards these ones. These ones are fellow Eastern Europeans, and they also hate Russia. So it's a strategically good move for Poland, as well as just generally a good move. Because what's the downside? You're getting an influx of more people. These new people are going to hate Russia and going to be more willing to fight Russia if it comes to that. You also hate Russia, so that's a win-win for both of you. They're culturally similar to you because Ukraine and Poland aren't realistically that different aside from language. And best of all, a lot of these Ukrainian people that have the money to flee are going to be bringing in a lot of useful labor skills to Ukraine, or to Poland. And basically it's just gonna generally help the Polish economy to have that. So, like, there's no downside for Poland accepting all these refugees from Ukraine. And aside from that, I think Poland's also been funneling some things into Ukraine as well, just to help with the defense effort. So Poland, Estonia, and I think Finland, those are the main ones you're going to want to pay attention to in terms of actually sending stuff to help Ukraine. And then aside from that, the rest of the Baltics have all decided that they're going to invoke some NATO stuff to try and get bonus equipment sent towards Ukraine and sent towards their own borders. But currently, NATO, which is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is an alliance between pretty much all of Europe and America, they have been moving more troops to the east, but Ukraine is not a part of NATO, and they haven't yet been admitted to NATO, so there hasn't been any direct confrontations between America and Russia aside from diplomacy. Don't hate the Russian people, hate the Russian government? Yes, that. I don't actually have that on the list of things I should talk about, so I will just put that in here. Russia is currently a dictatorship. It is exclusively run by Vladimir Putin and his cronies. The Russian government is under the control of Putin. Nothing happens in government without Putin's knowledge and control, and the Russian people have pretty much no input on that. Vladimir Putin, the warmonger, the douchebag himself, he is responsible for all this mess. His delusions of grandeur and wanting to reestablish a grand Russian empire or the grand Soviet Union or whatever, he is solely responsible for this war. Do not send hate towards the Russian people for this war. This is exclusively Putin and his cronies and the Russian government. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm perfectly fine if you burn Russian flags. For now, that's fine. Because for now, the Russian flag means Putin. If any Russians are in the chat, I'm sorry to say, that's just how it is. Right now, the Russian flag means Putin. Because he has exclusive control over the political institutions of Russia. Probably the ideal for this war is depose Putin, kill Putin, something. Just end the one-person dictatorship, and whoever succeeds him will most likely sue for peace. That's pretty much it. I've seen a lot of interesting tales so far. On the first night of the invasion, there was a mass protest in Moscow. There were hundreds of people that came out to protest the war because obviously it's an unjust war. They should protest it. All of them immediately got arrested. I saw another story shortly after that in my Discord. There was somebody who lives in Russia, somebody who lives in a college campus with a prison just up the street, ironically. Somebody on that campus was flying a Ukrainian flag in that person's window, and I think it was the dean of the college or someone that confronted the person, told him, take down that flag. It's unpatriotic. Person said no. The dean reported him to the cops. He was arrested. Basically, right now, if you oppose the war, you will get arrested. It's the sad truth of the matter. It's pretty much a police state at this point. One more thing I should talk about before I move on from the individuals of this. There are a few names that you might recognize that should actually have some meaning. Specifically, a few animators. Sino0, the guy responsible for Putis Engage and Putis Engage Extreme, and worst of all, ST Black ST. Both of those guys, they live in Ukraine. ST Black ST and Sino are both Ukrainian nationals, if their Steam profiles are to be believed, which means they're kind of in the crosshairs for all of this. I'm just gonna say, all three of those guys probably send support their way. Things are probably not that calm on their home fronts, and hopefully they stay safe. That's all I can say. I really like watching all three of those guys. They make excellent videos. I thought it'd be worth mentioning. That's all. That's it. You're gonna go kill Putin yourself. Send some love their way. Try to tell them to stay safe. That's all I can tell you to do. That's pretty much all I have for the micro things of it in terms of the actual individuals involved. So let's get back to the bigger picture. So we've done the status of the West. Right. Let's talk about the United Nations. So you might be wondering, where's the United Nations in all this? Because surely the United Nations would have have some sort of input in all this. That's kind of their job, right? Prevent wars, make sure the modern political order stays intact. Well, fun fact, most of the actions in the United Nations that can be taken require a unanimous vote by 5 permanent members of the Global Security Council, one of which is Russia. And Russia can veto anything made in that vote. You can probably guess where that's going. They have vetoed everything so far that would stop their invasion, and they've pretty much just denied anything. Now, there was a meeting of the Security Council earlier today. It went on for a few hours. I was watching most of it while I was driving. I think that counts as distracted driving. Don't tell the cops, please. Or my mother. Don't tell either of them. But basically, what went on down there in the United Nations is everybody put to a vote, okay, should we do something about Russia invading because clearly this is unlawful, maybe we should stop this. Everybody except China and India voted yes. China and India abstained, and Russia voted no, for the obvious reason. And because Russia voted no, Russia's not going to stop their war. The interesting thing about this, the reason I bring this up, isn't just because the UN is incompetent when it comes to actually trying to stop wars. It's because the Ukrainian ambassador, he is such a special individual. You have to watch him. Over the last few weeks, he's been getting steadily more and more upset about things that have been happening. Over the last few days, he's appeared in the United Nations looking like a broken man. But over the last few days as well, he's pretty much dropped all pretense of professionalism, and he's just gone off on the Russian ambassadors and that whole mess. There were a couple key phrases I remember. I remember a few days ago, he concluded one of his speeches by looking at the Russian ambassador and saying something to the effect of, "There is no space in purgatory for war criminals, ambassador. They go straight to hell." The Ukrainian ambassador told that to the Russian ambassador to the United Nations. And then today, this was huge. I was almost shedding tears in the car just listening to this. There was a speech that he made after the vote today was denied by Russia, in which he asked everybody in the room to have a moment of silence. Just a moment of silence for the people that are going to be suffering because of this war. So the Ukrainian ambassador asked for a moment of silence for all the people that are going to be suffering as a direct result of this. And he got that moment of silence. He said, a moment of silence just to pray for these people. If you don't believe in God, you can meditate. And then he turned to the Russian ambassador to the United Nations, and this was so meaningful. He turned to the Russian ambassador and said, "And you, Mr. Ambassador, you can pray for salvation." And then there was the moment of silence. It was, wow. Yeah. That happened today. You can go back. It was on YouTube. You can watch this. You can see this yourself. It's astonishing. This is what happens when a nation is brought to the brink of destruction. Their politicians, they become human. I know it's crazy how that works, but Ukraine, something about that nation is just, they're tired of Russia's crap. That's all it is. Sigma rule grind set number 76. Flame the Russians. Flame. Speaking of flames, Russian heavy flamethrower vehicles were seen crossing the border a couple of days ago. So chalk that up to the war crime list. We'll get to the war crime list after this one next itinerary point. We got 2 itinerary points left. I just want to say what I think we should do. This is going to be my one little bit of, this is my political view. This is my input on this. I think we should enact a full embargo to Russia. I think the United States should cut all trade contacts with Russia. I think they should make any trade contacts or financial exchange with Russia illegal. I think troops and supplies should be sent to Ukraine. I don't think the US should declare war on Russia. I do think that maybe 1 or 2 volunteer brigades should be allowed. I think that would be balanced. I think if Russia can pull in their little puppet Belarus, I think it should be allowed that the United States should send in not too many troops, but at least some weapons. At very least. Definitely not the draft. No. That's my personal take on this. I think what Biden is doing is good. I think it's more than what Trump would have done. I think it's good to enact embargoes. I don't think it's enough. I think more is necessary. I'm not trying to cast blame at Biden, but I am trying to say more is necessary. Because this is a very key moment. If we let Russia get away with this, it will change the world order forever and in a not great way. Because it'll set the precedent that if all you have to worry about when invading a neutral country on your border is sanctions, that's literally all they have to worry about. If the rest of the world doesn't do more things to stop Russia, not just with economics, but also with actively supporting their enemies, because this is an unjust war. Who's this email from? I got an email. Interesting. An email from Joe Biden. Not an email to me specifically, just a general email that I'm signed up for. Just something relating to the Supreme Court nominee he chose. I'm not going to do like a clickbait. It's 3 a.m. I got an email from the president. Yeah, it took me off guard. I had to look at that. If by chance Poland will be invaded, the U.S. can be allowed to invade? Yes. If any member state of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is invaded, everyone else gets called in immediately. That's how it works. If Russia makes any more moves on any of their neighbors, except for maybe Finland, I forget if Finland is in NATO, but all the rest of the Baltic states, all the rest of the Nordic states, all the rest of the Slavic states, all of them are in NATO. Any of them, if any of them get invaded or attacked in any way, everyone else gets dragged in. There is war with Russia. And at that point, you might be able to reasonably call that a world war. I'm not sure. Finally, last up on the list of things to talk about, war crimes committed and potential outcomes. So, let's start the war crime counter, talking about all the war crimes that Russia has committed. Let's see. They've bombed an orphanage. I know that much. Early on in the war, they dropped a bomb on a 14-year-old girl who was riding her bike through a peaceful village. Indiscriminate firing of rockets throughout civilian targets. That's a pretty big one. They've been doing that a lot. Rockets are just landing in civilian parts of cities where there's no reason to suspect that there's any military force. So there's that. Flamethrowers cross the border. I feel like flamethrowers, that's probably a war crime, right? Let's see. What else is there? I think there was something about hospitals, something about rockets hitting a hospital. Oh, there was another one. A Russian tank ran over a civilian car with the civilian still inside it. Granted, the civilian did survive, but I feel like that would also count as a war crime. Use of flamethrowers in wars against the Geneva Convention? Well, there you go. Oh, there was that whole thing in, they fired on a Turkish ship the other day. I don't think anyone was hurt, but I know the Russian Navy accidentally, quote, fired on a Turkish ship. I think that might count as a crime. Bombed a kindergarten. So, needless to say, all of this that's been going on, this is not a just war. I'll reiterate that again for the 50 billionth time today. This is not a just war. Yes, there might have been some issues with some of eastern Ukraine's provinces and the whole Russian ethnic group wanting to be elsewhere. That might be true. Maybe. Potentially. However, that is not justification for the type of war that has started, especially considering the fact that this is a full-scale invasion. They are basically just bomb rushing Kiev at this point. Their goal is to decapitate the government by taking out Zelensky, the Giga Chad in office who's rallying everyone to the point of death. Have you guys seen Lord of the Rings? This is their Helm's Deep. That's a comparison that I can make. This is their Helm's Deep in the sense that if they win the Battle of Helm's Deep, that's not the end of the war, but if they lose the Battle of Helm's Deep, nobody else will get saved. Yeah, Zareth, sometimes my mic does crackle. Sometimes it's not great. Usually I just edit that out. Try to ignore it if it does that. Oh, speaking of which, Zareth Zen in the Twitch chat, this is the guy who made this map. Thank you, Zareth, very much. He has been very useful in the past for doing map work for me, and I asked for this on a very short notice. He was able to get this map to me within 24 hours. Thank you very much for that. What do you think about calling Zelensky the Great? Zelensky the Great, that's an interesting concept. There hasn't been someone with the title the Great in a very long time. Like, not since the age of monarchs. Basically, Putin's strategy here, Putin knows the Ukrainians are going to resist to the death, so he's doing everything he can to break their spirit. But in the process of doing so, that's only hardening them. Bombing orphanages? Not a good look. Bombing kindergartens? Not a good look. Indiscriminately firing rockets into civilian-occupied areas of the nation's capital, which has stood in a peaceful state for 40 years? Not a good look. Invading a country that has deliberately tried to have a neutral foreign policy because it deliberately did not want to aggravate your nation? Not a good look. All of these not a good look moments, they mount very quickly, and that's why the Ukrainians are so determined to stand. This is a just war. It's been a long time since there's been a truly just major war in this world, and this is that. I don't really think I have much more to say about this. I think you guys have a pretty strong grasp on the topic. Let's see, is there anything else? Potential outcomes, actually. That's good. So potential outcomes, I'm saying best case scenario, Ukraine is able to stop the advance at Kiev, they hold, and eventually the Russian morale runs out. If it can be proven that Russia, even despite their massive size, their massive military, despite everything, if Russia cannot kill Ukraine outright, there will be a coup or Putin will resign. One of the two. Because eventually the suffering in Russia, because of the economic sanctions and the perceived incompetence of the Russian army, will grow so bad that either the people will rise up in such a way that Putin can't stop it. Presumably that would happen by one of his elites assassinating him. Or Putin would realize it's the end, resign, and then try to take amnesty in a foreign country or something. Considering Russia's recent war crimes, how long will Putin go to federal prison for? He'll be tried at The Hague if he can be captured, that's all I know. I don't know enough international law to be able to say how long he would be in prison for or what sentence he would face. I just know he would go to The Hague if he was ever captured. Isn't this how Hitler rose to power? Yes, actually. The only difference between Hitler and Putin in this case is Hitler had a strong economy economy. He had a strong national spirit, and everything about the populace of Germany at the start of World War II, they wanted revenge. They had a bloodlust for France because they were pissed at how France treated them after World War I. The difference here is a majority of the Russian populace, they're completely fine with the status quo. Last I checked, the majority of the Russian populace, they may not like the West that much, but they don't have any blood grudge with the West. And now the idea that out of nowhere, for a very clearly BS reason, they're going to be invading Ukraine and risking their lives for it, not a good look. Not a good look. So potential outcomes, best outcome is either Putin resigns or is assassinated, and then whoever the successor is immediately calls for a ceasefire and then sues for peace. Worst possible outcome, he succeeds outright. He levels Kiev to the ground to, get rid of the resistance there, moves his troops into position, and then he keeps going. Because if he isn't stopped in Ukraine, if he doesn't take such a big blow in Ukraine that he can't help but stop, then he'll just keep going. Because with all the sanctions, the Russian economy will not survive in the long term. Which means if he succeeds in Ukraine, he still doesn't have a chance in the long term unless he pushes on. The one chance Russia has for dominance is basically just conquer Ukraine, suppress everyone, basically commit a genocide. Yeah, that's right. I just said the G word. That's going to be coming up if people don't stop Putin. I have no doubt that that is not beyond Putin. His best case scenario, suppress and completely squash Ukraine, and then immediately wheel his troops around and invade the Baltics. That being Poland, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia. I don't have any guarantee that this would happen, but I'm going to be honest, I never thought the Ukrainian invasion would actually happen to the extent it did. And that pretty much called into question my entire view of Putin as a person. And if he's willing to do something that blatant, he might just be insane enough to take on NATO. It just might be crazy enough. That's why I'm doing this stream, because I think more people need to be made aware of this. Now, historically, I haven't exactly had the best record with bringing up awareness for things, but this is a land war in Europe that is going to inevitably see thousands to tens of thousands to potentially hundreds of thousands of deaths. And that's not a good thing. This is a major historical event. This will go down as the defining moment of the Biden administration. Afghanistan, that whole pullout, that will pale in comparison to the Ukrainian crisis. People in 100 years are going to be talking about this as a major historical event. This is just big. It's too big to ignore, even for a gaming channel. Spoiler alert, I'm a political science major in college. I'm going to be talking about this more in the future. Any questions? Remember, it's mostly Putin. Yeah, it's not the people of Russia. Can you kick the pyro named Epic? Nah, Epic's a friend of mine. I'm aware he tryhards. I'm aware everyone hates him, but he's a friend, which basically means nepotism. He doesn't break any rules, so he's just obnoxious. That's all it is. Are they going to deploy Freddy Fazbear? No, they won't. I've already said the U.S. is not sending troops. What is your opinion of the actions of Anonymous? Oh, that's an interesting thing to point out. Hacker group Anonymous, which has existed for a while, but hasn't been heard from a while. About 12 hours ago, I want to say, they declared war on the Russian military. Since then, the hacker group Anonymous, which is just basically a collective of 4chan hackers, that's pretty much all it is, they've taken down the website of the Russian military. Get that through your head. They took down the main website of the Russian military just with various DDoS attacks. Like, that's it. It's freaking funny. Do you think Russia will try to collect all the Baltic states and reform the USSR? Maybe. At this point, I don't think anyone has a firm view of what exactly Putin's end goal is, but more conquest is definitely on the menu. What are Putin's motivations? I don't know. A reformation of Russian greatness is obviously on the menu. Reclaiming some of the borders of the former Soviet Union or the former Russian Empire are obviously on the menu, but I don't know what his endgame is. Thoughts on St. Petersburg protests? Keep going. I am aware that people will get arrested, but at this rate, well, first of all, they're not going to execute all of you. Come on. Second of all, if people don't protest, Putin won't face opposition. If he doesn't face opposition, the war will continue. That's simply how it is. There will have to be sacrifices on the Russian home front. How bad is it if it goes nuclear? I don't think it will go nuclear under any circumstances. I think Putin would rather kill himself than hit the nuclear button. But if it did go nuclear, that's basically the end of the world right there. Operate under the assumption that it's not going to go nuclear. Don't get worried that it will. I don't think it will. Sam, don't curse us. What could possibly go wrong? Oh, man. What have you done? Let's see. Oh, it's that stupid cringe demo baby again. People, thank you very much for watching. I know the stream has been definitely not anything like what I'm used to streaming, and I'm sorry for that. The world is a scary place. It's gonna get way worse. If anybody watching this is in Ukraine, stand strong. I'm not gonna say die, because obviously living is better, but stand strong. Do not give in to Russia. If anybody's in Russia watching this, I'm not gonna say protest, because that could get you arrested, but just don't cooperate with this war. This is not a just war. war. This is Putin. That's all this is. Your leader is corrupt, and your leader is a warmonger. He is spreading unnecessary suffering and death to tens of thousands of people. And if anybody's living anywhere else in Europe close to that, Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Romania, Hungary, just stay safe. All right, thank you guys for watching. I know the stream's not been great in terms of, you know, giving a good laugh, but hopefully it's at least helped inform you a little bit if you haven't been informed already. I hope I haven't told any lies here. If I have, I'll try to correct them in a pinned comment. Thank you for watching. Good night.